The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the crystalline halls. Captain Jake Morrison walked forward, his boots clicking against the smooth floor made of some alien material that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Behind him, Ambassador Lisa Parker adjusted her formal blue uniform one last time, her hands shaking slightly from nerves. This was the moment Earth had been waiting for. After 50 years of knowing that other intelligent life existed in the galaxy, humanity was finally ready to ask for membership in the Galactic Federation. The Federation controlled trade routes, shared advanced technology, and kept peace among hundreds of different alien species across thousands of worlds. The chamber was enormous, bigger than any building on Earth, 12 massive seats arranged. In a circle dominated the center of the room, each one designed for a different alien species. Strange creatures sat in those seats, some with multiple arms, others that looked like walking trees, and a few that seemed to be made of living metal. Dr. Kevin Hayes carried a heavy briefcase filled with documentation about human achievements. Inside were reports about how humans had cured diseases, saved endangered animals, and developed clean energy. He had spent 3 years preparing this presentation, believing it would show the galaxy that humanity deserved a place among the stars. The human delegation may approach, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The words were translated by small devices attached to their ears, turning alien sounds into English. Lisa Parker stepped forward and bowed respectfully. She had studied the customs of each Federation species for years, learning how to show proper respect without appearing weak. Honored members of the Galactic Council, I am Ambassador Lisa Parker, representing the planet Earth and all of humanity. The largest creature in the chamber had 4 arms and skin that looked like blue metal. This was the Zellari representative, and Lisa knew from her studies that the Zellari were one of the most powerful species in the Federation. When it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. We have reviewed your application, humans. Your species seeks to join our Federation and gain access to our trade networks and technologies. The alien's 4 arms moved in complex patterns as it spoke. We have studied your history and your current capabilities. Commander Ryan Brooks, who had piloted their ship to this distant space station, felt a chill run down his spine. Something in the alien's tone suggested this meeting would not go well. Another creature spoke up. This one looked like a giant insect, with multiple eyes that glowed green in the dim light. The Kithara have examined human behavior patterns. Your species shows disturbing levels of emotional instability and aggressive tendencies. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, opening his briefcase. If I may present evidence of human progress and peaceful achievements, that will not be necessary, interrupted a third alien that resembled a walking tree with bark-like skin. The Valdorian analysis team has concluded that humans pose a significant risk to galactic stability. Lisa felt her heart sink, but she pressed on. Respected council members, humanity has made great strides in recent decades. We have eliminated many diseases, we have begun to repair our planet's environment, and we have shown we can work together for common goals. The metal-skinned Zellari leader raised one of its 4 hands. Your species has fought over 700 major wars in the past 2,000 years. You have used weapons capable of destroying your entire planet. You have polluted your homeworld and driven countless species to extinction. But we learned from those mistakes, Captain Morrison interjected, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades in military service. We stopped the wars, we cleaned up the pollution. We brought back species from the edge of extinction. A new voice joined the conversation, this one belonging to a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. The Nexari Empire has observed human expansion into space. You establish military bases before scientific stations. You arm your exploration vessels. You approach the unknown with weapons ready. Commander Brooks wanted to explain that space was dangerous, that unknown threats required preparation. But he could see that the council had already made up their minds. The insect-like Kithara buzzed loudly, a sound that their translation devices rendered as words. Human emotional responses are too extreme. You feel anger, hatred, love, and joy with intensities that other species find disturbing. Such Emotional creatures cannot be trusted with advanced technologies. Dr. Hayes finally managed to speak up. Our emotions are also what drive us to protect the innocent, to sacrifice for others, to never give up when facing impossible odds. These same emotions you call weaknesses have led to our greatest achievements. They have also led to your greatest failures, replied the tree-like Valdorian. You fight wars over ideas, over resources, over territories. You cannot control your own violent impulses, Lisa tried one more time. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. Let us start with limited membership with oversight if necessary. We want to contribute to galactic peace and prosperity. The crystalline Nexari representative's body flashed with different colors as it spoke. The decision is unanimous among all 12 founding species. Humanity's application for Federation membership is denied. The words hit the human delegation like a physical blow. Jake Morrison's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Ryan Brooks stared at the alien council in disbelief. Kevin Hayes clutched his briefcase full of useless documentation. Furthermore, continued the Zalari leader, humanity is restricted to its home solar system. No human vessels are permitted beyond the orbit of your outermost planet. Trade with Federation species is prohibited. Transfer of Federation technology to humans is forbidden. Lisa Parker felt tears forming in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of these aliens. You are making a mistake. Humanity has so much to offer the galaxy. Perhaps, said the Valdorian representative, but the risk is too great. Your species must prove it can achieve lasting peace and emotional stability before it will be reconsidered for membership. How long? Asked Captain Morrison through gritted teeth. The Council will review humanity's status in 100 standard years, replied the Zalari. If your species demonstrates significant improvement in that time, a new application may be submitted. The meeting was over. The massive doors opened again, and the human delegation found themselves escorted out by tall, silent guards that looked like living statues. They walked through the gleaming corridors of the space station in stunned silence, passing groups of aliens from dozens of different species, all of them citizens of a galaxy that had just rejected Earth on the journey back. To their ship, Lisa Parker finally spoke. 100 years. They want us to wait 100 years. They want us to change who we are, Ryan Brooks replied bitterly. They want us to become something we're not. Dr. Hayes looked out through a window at the stars scattered across the darkness of space. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are too violent, too emotional, too dangerous. Captain Morrison stopped walking and turned to face his companions. No, they're wrong. They don't understand us, and they don't want to understand us. They see our strength and call it weakness. They see our passion and call it instability. So what do we do now? Lisa asked. Jake Morrison looked back toward the council chamber, then out at the stars beyond. We go home. We tell Earth what happened here. And then we prove them wrong. The human delegation boarded their ship, the UES Horizon, and began the long journey back to Earth. Behind them, the space station grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the stars. Ahead lay their home solar system, now their prison, but also their sanctuary. As the ship entered hyperspace, none of them could have imagined that their rejection would become humanity's greatest gift. The galaxy had forced them to stand alone, and, in doing so, had given them the freedom to become something unprecedented among the stars. The aliens had made their decision based on fear and misunderstanding. In time, they would learn that rejecting humanity was the biggest mistake in galactic history. 25 years had passed since the Galactic Council closed the doors on humanity. Dr. Amanda Foster stood in the observation deck of the Mars Research Institute, watching the red planet's 3 artificial moons drift across the rust-colored sky. These moons were not natural satellites but massive space stations that humanity had built to house their growing population and industries. The rejection had hurt at first. Earth's governments had struggled with the news that they were alone in a galaxy full of aliens who wanted nothing to do with them. Some people had given up hope of ever reaching the stars. Others had fallen into despair, believing humanity was truly as flawed as the aliens claimed. but Jake Morrison had been right that day on the space station. Humanity had proven the aliens wrong in ways none of them could have imagined. Amanda turned from the window and walked through the research facility's gleaming corridors. The walls were made of a new material that human scientists had developed, called quantum glass. It was stronger than steel but lighter than aluminum, and it could bend light in ways that made rooms appear larger than they actually were. In the main laboratory, Dr. Claire Bennett was working on her latest project. Claire had been just a graduate student when the aliens rejected humanity, but now she was one of the most brilliant minds in the solar system. Her specialty was something the Federation had never even dreamed of: dimensional manipulation. "How's the test going?" Amanda asked, watching Claire adjust complex controls on a machine that seemed to fold space around itself. "Better than expected," Claire replied, her eyes focused on readouts that showed measurements in 11 different dimensions. "We can now phase a ship completely out of normal space for up to 6 hours. The Federation sensors wouldn't even know we were there. This was humanity's secret." Without access to alien technology, human scientists had been forced to think in completely new ways. While the Federation races shared knowledge among themselves, humans had to create everything from scratch. This limitation had become their greatest advantage. General Nathan Cross walked into the laboratory, his uniform displaying the insignia of the Sol Defense Force. Nathan had been a young officer when humanity was rejected, burning with anger at the aliens' dismissal. Now he commanded a military force that could probably defeat the entire Federation fleet, though they had never tested that theory. "Dr. Bennett, we need an update on the new drive systems," Nathan said. "Our scouts report that Federation patrols are increasing near the edge of our solar system." Claire nodded and led them to another section of the laboratory. Here, a team of engineers was working on engines that defied everything the galaxy thought. It knew about space travel. The Federation used faster-than-light drives that required massive amounts of energy and left detectable signatures across dozens of star systems. Human ships now moved through folded space, slipping between layers of reality like ghosts. They could travel from Earth to Pluto in minutes, completely invisible to any known detection method. More importantly, they could travel beyond the solar system without the Federation ever knowing. Captain Rodriguez returned from his latest mission yesterday, Nathan continued. He's mapped 17 new star systems, and we've found 12 planets suitable for human settlement. Amanda smiled at this news. Captain Danny Rodriguez had taken over his father's role as humanity's greatest explorer. While the Federation thought humans were trapped in their solar system, Danny and others like him had been secretly establishing colonies across a 100-light-year radius around Earth. They walked to the communications center, where Director Tony Williams was coordinating mining operations throughout the solar system. Tony's teams had discovered something the Federation had missed in their long exploration of the galaxy: crystalline formations that contained more energy than antimatter. "The Europa mines are producing beyond all expectations," Tony reported, pulling up holographic displays that showed energy readings. "These crystals don't just store power, they seem to generate it by interacting with quantum fluctuations in space itself." This discovery had revolutionized human civilization. Cities on Earth now ran on clean, limitless energy. Spacecraft could operate for decades without refueling. Manufacturing plants could create materials that were stronger and lighter than anything the Federation had ever developed. In another part of the facility, engineer Sophie Mitchell was working on atmospheric processors that had turned Venus from a hellish wasteland into a garden world. The thick, poisonous atmosphere had been converted into breathable air in just 15 years. Now Venus supported 3 billion human colonists in floating cities that drifted through the planet's upper atmosphere. The environmental restoration project on Earth is also ahead of schedule, Sophie reported when they visited her section. "We're not just cleaning up the old pollution anymore. We're actually improving the planet's atmosphere and oceans beyond their natural state." "Dr. Ashley?" Turner looked up from her workstation, where she was monitoring the consciousness transfer project. Ashley had solved one of humanity's oldest problems: death from old age. Human minds could now be transferred to new, improved bodies that were immune to disease and aging. We've successfully transferred over 10,000 volunteers so far. Ashley said, no memory loss, no personality changes. Death is becoming optional for our species. Commander Luis Garcia arrived with the latest reports from the defense projects. Luis had developed shield technology that could absorb energy attacks and redirect them back at attackers. His shields didn't just stop Federation weapons, they made human ships stronger with each attack they absorbed. The new defensive systems are working perfectly, Luis said. Our test ships can withstand the combined firepower of the Federation battle fleet and emerge completely undamaged. Nathan Cross looked around at all the incredible advances humanity had made. It's ironic. The aliens thought we were too primitive and violent to join their Federation. Now we've developed technology they can't even understand. Amanda nodded, remembering the day of rejection. They saw our emotions as weakness. They didn't realize that the same passion that drives us to fight also drives us to create, to explore, to never give up when facing impossible challenges. In the Deep Space Monitoring Station, technicians tracked human ships moving invisibly through Federation territory. These vessels gathered intelligence on alien civilizations, always careful never to be detected. What they had learned was troubling. The Federation had grown weak and complacent. They had stopped innovating centuries ago, content to share existing technologies among member species. Their military was powerful but predictable, using the same tactics they had employed for thousands of years. Meanwhile, humanity had developed warfare techniques that existed across multiple dimensions. Human soldiers could phase in and out of normal space during battle. Their weapons could target enemies through solid matter by briefly existing in parallel dimensions. Dr. Bennett pulled up a holographic star map showing human expansion. Red dots marked human colonies, green lines showed trade routes, and blue markers indicated research stations. The display revealed the truth that the Federation didn't know. Humanity now controlled more territory than any single Federation species. We've built all this in just 25 years. Claire said with pride. Imagine what we'll accomplish in the next 25. Amanda walked back to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the aliens who had rejected humanity continued their slow, predictable existence, never knowing that the species they had dismissed was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. The isolation had forged humanity into explorers, innovators, and warriors unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had taken their rejection and turned it into the foundation for an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. Soon, Amanda thought the galaxy would learn what happened when you underestimated human determination. The Federation had made their choice 25 years ago. Now humanity was ready to show them the consequences of that decision. The rejected had become the superior, and they had done it all on their own. The emergency alarms echoed through the crystal corridors of Kepler Station, their piercing wail drowning out the panicked voices of alien diplomats. Chancellor Vex Thai of the Zolari Confederation stood frozen before the massive holographic display in the Galactic Council chamber, his forearms trembling as he watched entire star systems disappear from the galactic map. The display showed a wave of darkness spreading across Federation space like spilled ink on paper. Red warning symbols blinked frantically as communication was lost with colony after colony. Worlds that had been home to billions of beings simply vanished from all sensor readings, leaving behind empty space where thriving civilizations had existed just hours before. How many systems have we lost? Asked President Coulter, his crystalline body flickering with distressed patterns of light. As leader of the Galactic Federation, he had never faced a crisis like this in his 300 years of life. 47 confirmed loss, sir, replied Communications Officer Zelenara, her insect eyes glowing with fear. We're receiving final transmissions from the Outer Rim territories. Something is consuming everything in its path. The first reports had come from Deep Space Monitoring Stations 3 days ago. Long-range sensors had detected massive objects moving through the void between galaxies, heading directly toward Federation space. The objects were unlike anything in the galactic databases, appearing to bend light and space around them. Admiral Corathan of the Cathara military stepped forward, his 6 legs clicking against the floor. The admiral was a veteran of dozens of conflicts, but even he looked shaken by what they were facing. The enemy appears to be composed of some form of living shadow. Our weapons pass right through them, but they can somehow interact with our ships and planets. Dr. Yomura, the Federation's chief scientist, projected her findings onto the main display. The Valdorian researcher had been studying the limited data they had gathered from the few ships that had escaped the initial attacks. These entities exist partially outside normal spacetime. Our instruments can barely detect them, and our weapons are completely ineffective. The display showed grainy images captured by fleeing Federation vessels. Dark shapes moved through space like enormous shadows, their forms constantly shifting and changing. They seemed to absorb light itself, creating zones of absolute darkness wherever they appeared. When they encountered Federation ships or planets, the matter simply vanished, consumed by the living darkness. "They're not just destroying our worlds," Dr. Yomura continued, her tree-like form swaying with distress. "They're consuming them entirely. Matter, energy, even the space itself seems to be drawn into these creatures." Chancellor Vexthai reviewed the tactical reports with growing despair. The Federation military, proud and powerful for thousands of years, was being swept aside like leaves in a storm. Their most advanced warships were no match for enemies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "What about the evacuation fleets?" President Coulter asked. "Moving as fast as possible, sir," Admiral Corathan replied. "But these creatures are faster than our ships. They're catching up to our evacuation convoys." The holographic display updated, with new information showing the current position of the invasion force. The darkness had penetrated deep into Federation territory, consuming the industrial worlds of the Nexari Empire and approaching the core systems where trillions of beings lived. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Vecolor S. Fleet," announced the communications officer. "He's attempting to make a stand at the Valorian system." The main screen shifted to show Admiral Vecolor standing on the bridge of his flagship. The proud Zellery commander had assembled over 1,000 ships, the largest military force in Federation history. Behind him, the crew worked frantically at their stations, preparing for what they all knew would be a desperate battle. "Council members," Admiral Vecolor's voice crackled through the transmission. "We're about to engage the enemy. Our sensors show approximately 50 of the shadow entities approaching our position. All Federation forces are ready for combat." President Coulter leaned forward in his seat. "Admiral, you have authorization to use any weapons necessary. The survival of the Federation depends on you." "Understood, sir. Beginning the attack now." The transmission switched to external cameras showing the Federation fleet arranged in perfect battle formation. 1,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined energy output enough to destroy entire planets. Beams of light, plasma bolts, and quantum torpedoes filled the space between the fleet and the approaching darkness. For a moment, it seemed like the attack might work. The energy weapons struck the shadow creatures, creating brilliant flashes of light in the darkness of space. But instead of being destroyed, the creatures seemed to absorb the energy, growing larger and darker with each hit. "They're feeding on our weapons," Dr. Yomura gasped, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. "The energy is making them stronger." On the screen, the shadow creatures reached the Federation fleet. What happened next defied all understanding of physics and warfare. The dark entities passed through the ship's shields as if they didn't exist, engulfing entire vessels in writhing darkness. Within seconds, the mighty warship simply vanished, consumed completely by the living shadows. "Admiral Vecolor, respond," Chancellor Vexthai called out desperately. But there was no response. The transmission had cut off when the flagship disappeared into the darkness. In less than an hour, the entire Federation fleet was gone. 1,000 ships and their crews had been consumed by creatures that seemed to exist beyond the normal laws of reality. The shadows continued their advance toward the core systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. "How is this possible?" President Coulter asked, his crystalline form flickering with patterns of despair. "Nothing should be able to exist partially outside spacetime. It violates every principle of physics we understand." Dr. Yomura studied. The sensor readings from the battle. These creatures must come from somewhere beyond our galaxy, perhaps from the space between realities. They seem to feed on organized matter and energy, breaking down complex structures and consuming them. More reports arrived throughout the day. The peaceful Valdorian homeworld had been evacuated just hours before the shadows arrived. The proud cities of the Nexari Empire were gone, consumed by darkness that left no trace they had ever existed. Entire civilizations that had thrived for thousands of years were being erased from history. "We need to contact the other galactic powers," Admiral Corathan suggested. "The Andromeda Confederation, the Spiral Alliance, maybe they have weapons that can fight these things." "Already tried," replied the communications officer. "Long-range sensors show the darkness has reached their territories too. We're receiving similar distress calls from across the galaxy cluster." President Coulter stood and walked to the large viewing window that showed the stars beyond Kepler Station. Somewhere out there, the creatures of living shadow were consuming everything in their path. The Federation military was helpless against enemies that could absorb their weapons and existed in dimensions their science couldn't even detect. "Sir," Dr. Yomura said quietly, "there might be one option we haven't considered." "What option?" the president asked, though something in the scientist's tone suggested he wouldn't like the answer. "The humans," she replied. "Their technological development took completely different paths from ours. Their science explores areas we never investigated. They might have capabilities we don't understand." Chancellor Vexthias' forearms gestured dismissively. "The humans are primitive and violent. We rejected them from the Federation for good reasons. Those same qualities might be exactly what we need now," Dr. Yomura argued. "Their willingness to explore dangerous technologies, their refusal to accept limitations, their emotional drive to never surrender. These creatures have defeated our logic and our advanced science. Maybe we need something more primitive and unpredictable." President Coulter continued staring out at the stars, watching as distant suns winked out one by one as the darkness consumed them. The irony was not lost on him. The species they had rejected as too dangerous might be their only hope for survival. "Prepare transmission to the Sol system," he said finally. "It's time to ask the humans for help." President Helen Carter sat at her desk in the Oval Office, staring at the strange device that had appeared in Earth's orbit just hours ago. The crystalline object was transmitting on frequencies that human technology barely recognized, carrying a message that would have seemed impossible just days before. The holographic image flickered to life above her desk, showing an alien figure she had only seen in old diplomatic records. President Coulter of the Galactic Federation stood before her, his crystalline body dim with exhaustion and defeat. Behind him, she could see the chaos of what looked like an emergency command center. "President Carter of Earth," the alien leader began, his translated voice heavy with desperation. "I am President Coulter of the Galactic Federation. 28 years ago, we denied your species membership in our organization. Today I come before you to request immediate military assistance." Helen leaned back in her chair, hardly believing what she was hearing. The same aliens who had rejected humanity as too primitive and violent were now asking for help. Secretary of Defense Greg Palmer stood beside her desk, his face showing the same mixture of surprise and grim satisfaction that she felt. "Our space is under attack by entities we cannot understand or fight," President Coulter continued. "In the past week, we have lost over 100 star systems to creatures that exist partially outside normal reality. Our military forces are completely ineffective against them." The hologram shifted to show images from the battle zones. Helen watched in horror as entire Federation fleets simply vanished into writhing darkness. Planets disappeared as if they had never existed, consumed by shadows that moved through space like living nightmares. "These creatures absorb our energy weapons and feed on organized matter," the alien president explained. "They grow stronger with every attack we make against them. Our science cannot explain them, and our technology cannot harm them." Greg Palmer stepped forward. "Mr. President, why come to us? Your Federation has hundreds of member species with advanced technology far beyond ours." Coulter's crystalline form flickered with what looked like embarrassment. All Federation technology is based on the same fundamental principles. We share knowledge among our species, which means we all have the same limitations. The creatures exploit these limitations perfectly. Helen understood immediately. The Federation's greatest strength, their cooperation and shared knowledge, had become their greatest weakness. Every species used similar technology, thought in similar ways, and faced the same problems when confronting an enemy that operated outside their understanding. Your species developed in isolation, Coulter continued. Your technology follows paths we never explored. Your science investigates areas our civilization avoided. We believe you may have capabilities that these creatures cannot predict or counter. Admiral Karen Price entered the office, carrying classified reports from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. For years, human scouts had been secretly observing Federation territory, gathering intelligence while remaining undetected. They had watched the invasion begin and tracked its progress across alien space. "Ma'am, our scouts confirm what President Coulter is saying," Admiral Price reported. "The shadow creatures have consumed over 150 Federation worlds. Their evacuation fleets are scattered across dozens of star systems, and the creatures are still advancing." Helen looked at the holographic alien leader. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" "We request that humanity deploy its military forces to assist in defending Federation territory," Coulter replied. "We will provide you with complete tactical data about these creatures and full access to our remaining resources." Secretary Palmer crossed his arms. "You rejected us because you thought we were too violent and unpredictable. Now you want us to fight your war for you." "Yes," Coulter admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, "we were wrong about your species. We judged you by our own limitations and failed to see your potential. The qualities we feared might be exactly what we need to survive." Helen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling streets of Washington. Somewhere above the Earth's atmosphere, human ships with technology the Federation couldn't imagine waited for orders. Ships that could phase between dimensions, weapons that operated across multiple realities, soldiers trained in combat techniques that defied conventional understanding. "Colonel Steve Morrison, report to the Oval Office immediately," she said into her communicator. Steve was the son of Jake Morrison, the captain who had led humanity's delegation to the Federation all those years ago. He now commanded Earth's most elite military units. When Steve arrived, Helen could see his father's determination in his eyes. "Colonel, what's our military assessment of these shadow creatures?" Steve opened a tablet and displayed three-dimensional tactical analysis. "Based on our scout reports, these entities exist in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously. They can absorb conventional energy attacks because those attacks only affect 3-dimensional space." "Can we fight them?" Admiral Price asked. "Possibly," Steve replied. "Our dimensional phase weapons operate across multiple reality layers. Our quantum disruptors might be able to target their extra-dimensional components, but we won't know for sure until we engage them directly." President Coulter's hologram leaned forward eagerly. "You have weapons that can target multiple dimensions?" "Our science said such technology was impossible." "Your science was limited by your assumptions," Helen replied coolly. "Humanity learned to think outside conventional boundaries because we had no choice." Greg Palmer pulled up reports from human colonies throughout the galaxy. "Mr. President, you should know that humanity is no longer confined to our solar system as you demanded. We have established settlements in over 40 star systems, all developed without Federation knowledge or permission." Coulter's crystalline form flickered with shock. "That's impossible. Our patrol ships monitor the boundaries of your system constantly." "Your patrol ships see what we want them to see," Admiral Price said with a slight smile. "Human stealth technology operates on principles your sensors cannot detect." Helen returned to her desk and looked directly at the alien leader. "President Coulter, 28 years ago, your Federation judged humanity unworthy of membership. You called us violent, primitive, and dangerous. Now you come asking for our help." "Yes," Coulter replied simply, "we were wrong." "And if we save your Federation, what then?" Will you try to control us again? Will you demand we follow your laws and limitations? The alien president was quiet for a long moment. I cannot speak. For all Federation species, but I believe this crisis has shown us the value of different approaches to existence. If humanity helps us survive, we would welcome you not as subjects or junior members, but as equals. Helen looked around the room. At her advisors, we need to discuss this among ourselves. Give us 1 hour. After Coulter's hologram disappeared, the room fell silent. Finally, Greg Palmer spoke. They restricted us to our solar system and treated us like dangerous children. Why should we help them? Because it's the right thing to do. Colonel Morrison replied immediately. My father believed humanity could contribute to galactic civilization. This is our chance to prove he was right. Admiral Price nodded. Plus, if these shadow creatures consume the Federation, they'll eventually come for us too. Better to fight them now while we have potential allies than face them alone later. Helen considered the options. Humanity had grown strong in isolation, developing technologies and capabilities that the galaxy had never seen. They had the power to make a difference in this war, possibly to save entire civilizations from extinction. There's another factor, she said finally. The Federation's rejection forced us to become something greater than we might have been otherwise. Their mistake became our advantage. Maybe it's time to show the galaxy what humanity has become. She activated her communicator. Get me President Coulter again. When the alien leader's hologram reappeared, Helen looked him directly in his multifaceted eyes. President Coulter, humanity accepts your request for assistance. We will deploy our forces to help defend Federation territory against these creatures. Coulter's crystalline body brightened with relief and gratitude. Thank you, President Carter. How quickly can your forces be ready? Helen smiled, thinking of the human fleets already positioned throughout the galaxy, invisible to Federation. Sensors and ready for action. Our forces are already on their way. The shadow creatures are about to learn what happens when they threaten humanity's neighbors. The rejected had become the saviors, and the galaxy would never be the same. The space around Kepler Station erupted in brilliant flashes of light as human ships materialized from dimensional phase space. Commander Alex Taylor watched from the bridge of the UES Defiant as his fleet emerged behind the shadow creatures, in a maneuver that left the Federation observers speechless. All ships report ready for combat, announced Communications Officer Beth Clark. Dimensional anchors are charged and targeting the enemy formations. Alex studied the tactical display showing the massive shadow creatures advancing on the Federation's last major stronghold. The aliens had evacuated most of their civilians to Kepler Station, believing its powerful shields could protect them. They were wrong. The shadows were already beginning to penetrate the station's defenses. Captain Rodriguez, begin the dimensional anchor sequence. Alex ordered. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, commanding the UES Retribution, activated her ship's most advanced weapon system. Dimensional anchors reached out across multiple layers of reality, grabbing the shadow creatures and pulling them partially into normal three-dimensional space. For the first time since the invasion began, the creatures became solid enough to target with conventional weapons. Direct hits on targets 1 through 5, reported Weapons Officer Mike Stevens. The anchors are holding them in normal space. The shadow creatures writhed and twisted as they found themselves trapped between dimensions. Their usual ability to phase through attacks was gone, leaving them vulnerable to humanity's quantum disruptor weapons. These weapons, developed by Dr. Claire Bennett's research team, literally unraveled the exotic matter that held the creatures together. Fire quantum disruptors, Alex commanded. Beams of pure quantum energy lanced out from the human ships, striking the anchored shadow creatures. Instead of absorbing the energy like they did with Federation weapons, the creatures began to dissolve. Their dark forms came apart like smoke in a strong wind, their matter breaking down into harmless particles. On Kepler Station, President Coulter watched in amazement as the creatures that had destroyed his civilization's greatest fleets were eliminated one by one. How are they doing this? He asked Dr. Yilmora. Their weapons operate on completely different principles than ours, the Federation scientist replied, studying the sensor readings. Instead of feeding energy to the creatures, they're disrupting the quantum fields that allow them to exist. Squadron leader Maya Patterson led her fighter wing through the battle zone, her pilots performing maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. The small human fighters phased in and out of multiple dimensions, attacking the shadow creatures from angles that shouldn't have been possible. Phoenix Squadron, target the creature's quantum core, Maya ordered her pilots. Remember, these things exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Hit them in at least 4 dimensions to ensure a clean kill. Her pilots acknowledged the order and dove toward their targets. The Federation military observers watched in disbelief as human fighters disappeared and reappeared around the shadow creatures, firing weapons that seemed to exist in several realities at once. Admiral Susan Parker coordinated the overall assault from her flagship, the UES Victory. Susan had spent years studying Federation tactical data, learning from their mistakes. While the aliens had tried to fight the shadow creatures like a conventional enemy, humans understood that unconventional threats required unconventional solutions. All ships implement combat pattern Delta 7, Susan ordered. Keep those creatures anchored in normal space while our dimensional fighters take them apart. The human fleet moved with precision that amazed the watching Federation forces. Each ship knew exactly where the others would be, their commanders thinking and reacting with a speed that no alien species could match. The violence and aggression that the Federation had feared was now being used to save their lives. Dr. Peter Thompson, monitoring the battle from his research ship, made a crucial discovery. Admiral Parker, I've found their weakness. These creatures require a constant connection to their dimensional origin point. If we can sever those connections, they'll collapse completely. Understood, Doctor. Engineering teams, prepare the reality stabilizers. Reality stabilizers were devices that human scientists had developed to study dimensional physics. They created zones of locked space-time where nothing could exist outside normal 3-dimensional reality. When deployed around the shadow creatures, these devices cut their connection to whatever dark dimension they came from. Engineer Monica Davis activated the stabilizers from her position on the UES Pathfinder. Stabilizers deployed and active. The creatures are being forced completely into our reality. The effect was immediate and devastating to the shadow creatures. Cut off from their extra-dimensional existence, they became fully physical and vulnerable. Human weapons tore through them like paper, destroying in minutes what had taken the Federation months to even slow down. Target the command ship, Alex ordered, pointing at the largest shadow creature on his display. If we take out their leader, the rest might retreat. General Ashley Clark had been waiting for this moment. Her assault teams, equipped with dimensional armor and quantum rifles, prepared to board the enemy command vessel. Boarding teams, prepare for dimensional insertion. The human soldiers disappeared from their transport ships and materialized inside the shadow creature's body. The interior was a nightmare of twisted space and impossible geometry, but the soldiers had trained for combat in non-standard realities. Advance to the core chamber, Ashley ordered, leading her team through corridors that bent back on themselves. Remember, these creatures think in 11 dimensions. Don't trust what you see. The battle inside the command creature was unlike anything in military history. Human soldiers fought shadow beings that could attack from directions that didn't exist in normal space. But humanity's emotional nature, the very trait the Federation had condemned, gave them an advantage. Human intuition and instinct guided them through the maze of reality where logic and science failed. Core chamber located, reported Sergeant Tom Wilson, deploying quantum charges. The charges exploded across multiple dimensions simultaneously, tearing apart the quantum framework that allowed the command creature to exist. The massive shadow being convulsed and began to dissolve, its death cry echoing across dimensions. With their leader destroyed, the remaining shadow creatures began to retreat. They pulled back from Federation space, fleeing toward whatever dark realm they had emerged from. The human fleet pursued them to the edge of the galaxy, making sure they understood that this space was now protected. All shadow creatures have withdrawn beyond galactic boundaries, reported Admiral Parker. Federation space is secure. On Kepler Station, the surviving Federation leaders gathered to watch the human fleet return from their victory. President Coulter stood before the massive viewing window, his crystalline body bright with emotions the Federation rarely expressed. "They did it," he said quietly. "The humans saved us all." Chancellor Vexthai, who had been one of the strongest voices against human membership, approached the window. "We were blind fools. We judged them by our own limitations and failed to see their true potential." Dr. Yomura reviewed the battle data with scientific fascination. "Their technology is decades ahead of ours in fields we never even knew existed. Their military tactics operate on principles we don't understand. They fight like no other species in the galaxy." When the human fleet docked at Kepler Station, the Federation representatives gathered to greet their saviors. Admiral Parker stepped forward to represent humanity, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Sol Defense Force. "President Coulter," she said formally, "the shadow creatures have been driven from Federation space. Your people are safe." Coulter bowed deeply, a gesture of respect that shocked every Federation observer. "Admiral Parker, on behalf of the Galactic Federation, I offer humanity not just membership in our organization, but leadership of it. You have proven yourselves superior to every other species in the galaxy." Admiral Parker smiled and shook her head. "We appreciate the offer, President Coulter, but humanity has learned to stand on its own. We'll work with you as partners and allies, but we won't rule over you or be ruled by you." "Then what do you want from us?" Chancellor Vexthai asked. "Nothing," Admiral Parker replied. "We fought because it was the right thing to do, not because we wanted something in return. That's what you never understood about humanity. Our strength doesn't come from technology or weapons. It comes from our willingness to help others, even those who have wronged us." The Federation leaders stood in stunned silence as they realized the depth of their earlier mistake. They had rejected humanity for being too emotional, too violent, too unpredictable. But those same qualities had made humans the galaxy's saviors. As the human ships prepared to return to their secret colonies throughout the galaxy, President Coulter made one final transmission to Earth. "President Carter, the Galactic Federation formally apologizes for our treatment of humanity. We were wrong about your species in every possible way." "Apology accepted," came Helen Carter's reply from Earth. "But remember this lesson. Diversity makes us stronger. Different approaches to problems create better solutions. Never again reject a species because they think differently than you do."